Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you for coming on. I know you're homeschooling your daughter, Abigail, right now. So, with it being the pandemic and homeschooling your kids, I was curious how you think the pandemic is affecting people with disabilities, and what is being done in terms of medical and financial support.
Well, we have some real issues for people with disabilities. They are losing the support for caregivers, for example, and we fought very hard in the CARES Act that we passed back in the spring and provided for some funding so that people could continue to get home health care workers to come in to continue to help them live their independent lives. And right now we need to have passed a new pandemic response package. And in the HEROES Act that passed the House, there is significant dollars in that for caregivers. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell has not allowed us to vote on that bill, and in the versions that he's put forward, there's been no additional funds. So that will really be very, very difficult on the disability community, especially those who need a little bit of help to live independently. We may, in a worst case scenario, get to a place where people with disabilities will be forced to go back into institutions, and that's not ideal for anyone. And it's certainly something that I don't support. So for me, a priority is to make sure we have those additional funds to help people be able to stay in their own homes. And then beyond that, people are having a really hard time just with the economy, and many of them have lost their jobs. People with disabilities have a very difficult time getting the services that they need, and so this is it's a tragedy on top of a tragedy.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I'm really glad you're aware of that, because that is a huge issue. And changing the topic a bit, and you being the first female senator with a disability being in the U.S. Senate, and you're a wheelchair user like myself. I'm also a manual wheelchair user. I'm just curious, how do you think your presence in Congress has changed the infrastructure and made it easier for future individuals with disabilities to work in Congress?
Well, just exactly as you said, just me being in Congress physically has forced them to modify much of Capitol Hill. Now remember that Congressman Jim Langevin of Rhode Island has been a congressman for quite a while now, and he is also a wheelchair user, although he uses a motorized wheelchair. Because of him, many accommodations had been made, but even so, there was not enough. In many of the buildings in Congress, on Capitol Hill, for example, there might only be one wheelchair accessible restroom per floor, or maybe even in 2 floors. You'd have to go to, you'll see a sign next to a bathroom that says you can't use this bathroom. You have to go to the 3rd floor, east wing, to find a bathroom that's wheelchair accessible. So even those things still need to be modified. The Senate is just now modifying to make the Senate gym wheelchair accessible so that I can actually start using it to exercise. But still to this day, the U.S. Capitol building itself only has one entrance that I can go in and out of, and that entrance is not always staffed. So after hours, sometimes I find myself trapped and unable to leave the building, and I've just taken to just opening the doors anyway and setting off the alarm and have the Capitol Police come running and say, well, this is what happens when you don't make the Capitol wheelchair accessible. And so a lot of those things are works in progress, and I'm working very hard to make sure that as much of the Capitol itself is physically accessible, but it's nowhere near enough. And that's the same story all across our country, as you know.
Yeah, and as you said, being in Congress yourself is such a big representation, and I'm lucky to have, worked in the Senate and met you a couple times. And I was just wondering, when I was in the Senate, the evacuation plans were not really all that thorough. How has it been with you? Do you have do they have a better implementation plan for when emergencies come up, so it's not so haphazard? Or can it be improved?
Well, the evacuation plan can always be improved. Now, for me, of course, there is evacuation chairs and all sorts of things in my own offices. But and we've practiced evacuation a few times. but certainly those chairs are not available everywhere that I might possibly go. And it's not like I sit in my office the entire time that I'm at work. I'm actually going between hearing rooms and one place to another. So that has been an issue from time to time. And I do have an aide who travels with me everywhere. So that has been very helpful as well. But again, you know, I'm a United States Senator. I'm not the only person with a disability who uses these buildings and works here. Many other people with disabilities do as well, and they don't have the same accommodations that I do. And even just, you know, regular visitors to the Capitol should be able to get into any of their senators' offices. They should be able to have meetings anywhere they want to. And that simply is not the case right now. And so we must and should do better.
Yeah. And so to jump topics quickly here, I know climate change is also a huge issue that you care about as well. And it also affects people with disabilities in a lot of ways. So how do you think we can better include people with disabilities in climate change conversations and have them be part of the solution plan and help with mitigation plans, you know, not only just be seen as the problem?
Well, you know, I don't think people with disabilities are the problem, right? We are the ones who are going to be the most flexible and the best problem solvers. We've all had to accommodate and be flexible just to live our daily lives. So I think people with disabilities would be uniquely suited to be on any type of a committee or team to address issues, you know, that are really complicated, like climate change, because people with disabilities have learned to think outside the box, to find ways to just be themselves and be productive in the world. And so I would actually think people with disabilities would be much more effective on many of these teams because they can think in a much more creative way. And, you know, to be honest, that's what we're going to need in order to solve the climate crisis. We can't just rely on traditional strategies. We're going to have to be very much neutral on how we get to carbon neutral, for example. So let's figure out how we can get to the goal, set the goal, and then let's be creative about how we get there. And so I do think that it behooves all of us to make sure that people with disability can step forward and be part of any type of a team. And they also bring, you know, I started the Environmental Justice Caucus in the Senate because Black and brown in particular have been the victims of pollution.